Hello, YouTube. This is Manny Biel, and this is part 4 in my series reviewing and deconstructing the book Universally Preferable Behaviour by Stefan Molyneux, a book about ethics and morality. And in the last part, I mentioned meta-ethics, which is a whole, I'm not sure what the term is, a whole section of philosophy, basically arriving because of David Hume's is-ought distinction, which is a small quote in his book called A Treatise of Human Nature from 1739. And because, first of all, because Stefan Molyneux mentions that his is a system of ethics, or it's a sort of a tool for doing ethics or checking morality. So it's sort of halfway between ethics and metaethics in some way. I'm not quite sure where to place it. And that is also of some concern to me. And since he used terms like objective morality and subjective morality and so on, I'm not, those are sort of how I remember his using the term. That might not be an actual quote from his book. I don't exactly remember how he put it, but at least he points in a direction that there is a distinction between, are you able to observe morality, or is it some kind of mental construct? Judging from his earlier videos and through the years and so on, I'm pretty sure that he thinks that morality does not exist. Now, what if he means that ethic does exist, but morality does exist, or anything like that? I'm not sure. I would think that he thinks that none of it exists. It's purely a mental construct in order to adjust behavior before that behavior has been committed. So when we're dealing with these kind of questions, we are actually dealing with, referring to Hume's is-ought gap is an implicit appeal to meta-ethics. It is, there's no way around it, right? So, and that's his ground rule number one. So in that instance alone, there's a reason to take a stab at meta-ethics. Now, I am not going to run through the whole of meta-ethics, because there have been several, if not many, books written about meta-ethics and how to attack that. And it has been developing since the turn of the century, or the turn of the last century, like from around 1900. There are a lot of British philosophers who sort of delved into these questions. And somebody I found on the net here is a overview of what we are talking about when we are talking about metaethics. And believe me, it's extremely complicated. And you know, I have this kind of, I like things to be simple. If you need this kind of elaborate diagram to figure out what do you mean when you say something is immoral or moral, there is some problem somewhere. There's something that hasn't been solved or figured out. I know, like, if you take the proof for Fermat's last theorem, who was which apparently was solved some 20 years ago or something by someone called Wiles, I think. It was a sort of, I don't remember exactly, but something around 100 pages of mathematical proof. I'm not saying that necessarily it's incorrect, because it's a very long sort of proof, but, and I might remind people that the Fermat's last theorem, Fermat himself wrote in a book, the sentence is written in another book about another sort of kind of mathematics, as far as I remember. And he says, I have found a very simple proof of this, but there's no place in this margin of this book. So, and he never got to make the proof himself. And that's why it had become this huge proof, right? But if he would have made a simple proof of that, it probably wouldn't have been 100 pages, right? So you can go to your nearest store by, walking straight down there, right? Or you can take an airplane and a car and paragliding and a boat and so on, and arrive at the same place. There's nothing incorrect about arriving at the place in that fashion. It's just not very. We like things to be simple and useful, right? We have this idea of parsimoniousness, which is simplicity is preferred, not because it's necessarily the correct version, but in a host of solutions to something that are equally correct, choose the simple one, right? So when we look at this diagram for metaethics, there is the top question is there moral truth? And I think that starting point is incorrect. It should be, what is morality? Is there moral truth? It doesn't say, okay, it takes for granted that there is something called morality, and then somebody asks, can it be true? Right? So is there existence, morality, and truth? So can you know about morality? Truth is about knowledge, right? So now I know it's some guy or girl who has made this diagram and so on, and there's also these color codings of these boxes that the blue ones are about metaphysics, according to this person who has made this, right? The orange one about semantics, about how you use words, right? Or the meaning of words, I suppose. I tend to forget about semantics and these. I'm not perfect in around these areas. Green is epistemology, so these are about knowledge, and knowledge down here also. So it goes from metaphysics to knowledge to semantics to knowledge to metaphysics, and it sort of fumbles around, right? But in my opinion, all that has to do with everything that has to do with metaphysics and epistemology must be settled before you do ethics. So I don't give a flying F about meta-ethics as long as those who do meta-ethics hasn't done metaphysics and epistemology in a fashion that I can follow. So, but if you take the central question of sort of moral truth, is another way I have seen it put in metaphysical distinctions is it cognitive or is it non-cognitive? So if it's cognitive, you can observe it, right? You can go out in the world and then say, there's morality or immorality, or that thing has some morality or immorality to it, or something like that. And then the other camp that says, no, you can't observe morality. It's purely something going on in your mind and nothing else, right? And when you see the diagram here, the non-cognitives are those anti-realists. Right? They're over here, and the realists are over here. Realism or anti-realism. And it's also interesting the choice of words, right? The realist and the anti-realists, as if the realists are the cognitivists are the more correct, and these are anti, right? There are those who like the state and those who are anti-state, or the welfare state and the anti-welfare state, right? So anti is like, extremists or something, this kind of semantic where you put meaning into words, or you choose words that set a certain meaning up in people's head when they read it, and more or less consciously. Okay, so over here we have anti-realism. In other words, you can't experience it. So the next is, which is semantic. Do moral claims express beliefs? And the two possible solutions is error theory, which is a kind of metaphysics, and non-cognitivism, except quasi-realism and fictionalism, some forms. And I don't know what those are. I'm not particularly interested, to be honest. But at least it's worth pointing out that there is this whole plethora of things you can be in accordance or in relation to moral truth, right? I think this is a leading question. Is there moral truth? No, you have to first establish what is morality. What do you mean when you say moral, right? You can't just throw in a word and then say, can it be true? Well, if I say, is blah blah true? You want to know what a blah blah is, right? But because you have heard the term moral so many times, you have been set up or have become used to have a understanding of this word, and then you accept that people are just asking you to decide whether or not it can be true. But you need to establish what morality is. So it's not a very serious chart, this, right? I'm skeptical when it comes to metaethics. I think it's important in an important aspect to take a little stab at, but I'm kind of the guy who stays with Hume's is-ought gap. That's enough for me, right? When you gap that bridge, and I would say Hume is sitting over here on the non-cognitivist side. He's saying he has very big trouble understanding how you could observe morality, right? It's like saying is immoral, and therefore that is you should do this, right? That's like what he says, right? So he's an anti-realist in this context here, right? And all the anti-realists need to do is explain how you get to describing morality from something that from a definition of morality to some extent, right? So, okay, enough of this, but you have been warned. There's a whole, and I might add that it's interesting, a philosopher who delves into some kind of metaethics, but does not do not refer in any way to metaethics as such, and to my knowledge, never has in 14 years, have never referred to anything. Maybe just when you discuss ethics and you discuss, does it exist, does it not exist? These kind of questions are sort of will inevitably come up in a discussion about ethics. But I have never seen any direct reference to metaethics. Now, if I've been having a show about philosophy for 14 years, I'm pretty sure I would have at least done something that like I'm doing now to show that, okay, there's these things and what is my stance on this and so on, right? That would have been an interesting, but none of that with Stefan Molyneux. But at the same time, he is making a framework, as he mentioned in his book, for judging moral principles. So he's sort of halfway to metaethics, right? At least. So is it because he doesn't know of metaethics? If he doesn't know of metaethics, he's sort of an ignorant philosopher, right? But if he does know about metaethics but never mentions anything about it, he's sort of a joke of a philosopher, right? So it's just for your information, right? Okay, so I've been thinking a bit more about these so-called moral premises: theft, rape, assault, and murder, because, and I don't know why I didn't spot that immediately. I know I spotted it, but I didn't think of taking it further. But it is actually a problem of infinite regression, because if you are trying to establish morality, as he has said it done, he's going from there's no ethics at all, which means there's no morality, right? He's saying I'm having a starting point, there's no ethics at all, and I'm trying to construct everything, right? And then he says, okay, there's these four moral premises that everyone tends to believe in. You can't do that, man. I mean, it's like, okay, you're smuggling in morality from the back door and say, hey, I have some morality here, let's go. No. You have to point out how you got that morality part of them, right? You need to point out the morality. Otherwise, you're a fiduciary. You are a con artist. You're just violating the craft of being philosophically rigid, right? You are starting from no ethics, which means no morals, but then you smuggle this ready-made moral principles in without explaining what is moral or immoral about it. And that's meta-ethics. You need to go and say, but where is it? Or Hume's is, or point to it. At least give an example of how you see that, right? And if you can't do that, you are making a infinite regression of knowledge, right? Of insight. You're saying you have to know what it is to know what it is. But I brought this in that is that already. It's immoral or moral. So, but who decided what was moral about that? Was that you also? Then how did you decide that? But I just brought it in before that. I brought another one in before that, and I brought another sort of moral premise in before that to determine that it's moral. You can't do that, right? You can't add an attribute of something without explaining where that attribute came from. So it's manipulation, right? He's trying to, oh look, that's an airplane, and then he just drags theft, rape, assault, and murder in without you looking. See, I've got some more premises here. Look, how fine they are. Let's go do some ethics, right? Doesn't work, mate. Okay, these binding and bound, what is that? So sort of weasel word, right? It's sort of, it's say, okay, you are bound to do this, just like your teacher says, you have to do this because I say so, right? It's bullshit. There's no explanation what binding or bound is, right? And incumbent on me, it's like some kind of duty. I checked on Wiki that it means something like the current holder of an office or position, usually in relation to an election. Now, it may have, incumbent may have many sort of slangish terms, meanings, or, have a different meaning in different contexts. But it's not exactly clear to me what he means when something is incumbent. Is it duty-based? Are we talking deontology like Immanuel Kant? Is it categorical? Is it a categorical imperative? Are you trying to steal from Kant, or what are we doing? Are you being sort of inspired by his way of arguing? It would be nice to understand what you're doing. So there's another fluffy thing here. Preference and liking is not the same. And I tried to point that out in the last part, but I want to stress that again, that you liking something is not that you prefer that, right? That's in the act of liking something, you are not doing any kind of preference. You can't say that whatever I like more than I like something else. But there's nothing in that exact liking of, ice cream that means you necessarily have a preference for ice cream, right? So I'm not ruling out the idea of having a preference. I'm just pointing out that it seems to me that he tried to bridge a gap between liking something and equating that with a preference for something. That's two different kinds of categories, and you can't equate them. You can't just jump from one to the other. And it seems to me, as preference is a core part of the title of the book, that he's going to use this invisible jump from liking to preference and just go on with preference as if nothing has happened, right? So, but I'm taking care of making sure that I hold that in my mind when we go further. And then there's a statement like, if I can prove that the earth is round, then you're bound to accept it as true, unless you are willing to reject reason and evidence as criteria for truth. This is nonsense, and I pointed out in the last part why I think it's a proof is not the same as knowing the Earth is round. Right? If you're proving something on a piece of paper about Earth, that doesn't mean you know that thing about Earth. You know that whatever has gone on in that proof might be correct, but it doesn't prove anything about. It doesn't give you knowledge about the real thing. Right? You have to experience the real thing to have knowledge of that thing. That's important. That's very important. And then you're bound to accept it as true. F off. I'm not bound to do anything. What's true to me is true to me. You can't tell me what I think is true. You can't give me knowledge. I have to experience knowledge myself. You can't give me knowledge. And reason and evidence are not criteria for truth. Right? As I gave the example with the elephant, I can reason that if I want to see an elephant, I need to go to Africa. That's kind of reasoning, right? If I want this, I need to do that, and will possibly result in what I need, right? Evidence is when I sort of get to Africa or whatever, and I see some, elephant tracks, footprints or something like that's okay. That's evidence. We're going in that direction. It's evidential that we should go in that direction to get our knowledge. They are not criteria for truth, right? A criteria for truth is that you have knowledge of that thing you are proposing. I'm proposing elephant. When I finally get there, I'm saying that's an elephant, right? The criteria is I have knowledge of the elephant. That's the criteria for truth, right? So it's complete BS, right? It doesn't work. Okay. So the next part of the book is a chapter called Objective Truth. And let's just head out into it. See, I have some live chat here, so there's no one who has commented yet. So I'm not the one with the most viewers on YouTube. So I'm just checking if there was a question. A central challenge in understanding the nature of truth is the realization that truth does not exist in the world in the same way that a rock or tree does. Truth, no, it's a conclusion about a proposition, so it's not something that exists. I agree. I think I had to add the I think. The concept truth, is it a concept like an elephant? An elephant is a concept, right? Is truth a concept now? Aren't you conflating, ideas of how to categorize things? Is necessarily a relative term, all right? Though that does not mean a subjective or arbitrary term. Now we are dealing with subjective. Now when he says if something is subjective, he would say that the experience you have is particular to you. Whether or not it can be objective is another matter, but at least the experience of it is purely yours. Subjective or arbitrary term. The concept health is also a relative term. We compare health to sickness and also to relative standards of health. What is considered good health for a 90-year-old would scarcely be considered good health for a 20-year-old. No. I don't understand the comparison. I'm not disagreeing about the statement, but okay. The definition of a long life is very different now than it was 500 years ago. This does not mean that, however, that concept of health is entirely relative and subjective. A 10-year-old dying of leukemia is unhealthy. Why all these examples and analogies? Stop that. You were talking about truth and subjectivity. Stay with that. Don't give me all these examples. Just as a 20-year-old marathon runner is healthy by any definition, Currently, a man who lives 90 and statistically had a long life, though that would change if medical technology suddenly allows to be 200. Okay. I'll have to keep that. Truth is necessarily a relative term, though not a subjective term. I'll have to keep that. Maybe I'll have to just make a copy here and to make sure that I handle that sentence. As your definition of health expands, it does not invalidate earlier definitions, but rather extends them or clarifies them or something like. Okay. If medical technology advances to allow 90-year-olds to win marathons, then our definition of what is healthy for the aged will change. But that does not mean that the 20-year-old marathon runner suddenly becomes unhealthy. Learning algebra does not invalidate arithmetic. No, I guess not. Truth also has value relative to necessity. I'll have to keep that one also. Newtonian physics has been supplanted by Einsteinian physics, which has proven far more accurate in extreme situations such as extraordinarily high gravity or speed. However, sailors wishing to calculate the correct path across an ocean find Newtonian physics more than accurate enough. You wouldn't want to send a spaceship to Alpha Centauri using Newtonian physics, but it is totally fine for getting a ship from Lisbon to New York. The labor involved in learning and implementing Einsteinian physics is thus a net negative for the sailor. I guess, yeah. As a result, the sentence, Newtonian physics is less accurate than Einsteinian physics, but Newtonian physics is the best way to calculate a ship's path, can be considered a valid proposition. Newtonian physics is thus less accurate and more appropriate. I'm not sure where he's going with this. If we wanted to drink the purest possible water, we would likely pay thousands of... Why another example? Get to the point. Thus, purer is better gives away to purer is worse. Again, this does not mean that the purity of water is utterly subjective. Distilled water is always more potable than seawater. All right? So there are some truths that are more... Is that what I'm going to... The takeaway of this? It's more precise than other kinds of truths. Is that the relativity of it, or the arbitrarily? No, not mean that as subjective or arbitrary. So it must be an objective thing, truth. So truth is objective in his understanding, but it is necessarily a relative term. But I'm not sure how that goes with all these examples of Einsteinian and Newtonian physics. And so it's just like, I feel that he's not stating where he's going, and then he's using a lot of examples that sort of molds my mind into thinking a specific thing without arguing for the thing directly. So it's sort of a half argument, right? It's sort of a leading argument. I'm not sure what it's called. Okay, truth and objective reality. The concept of truth necessarily involves the concept of accuracy. The concept, is accuracy a concept? So what is the definition of concept now? Is everything you have in your head a concept? Because then the concept loses its potency as a term, right? The concept of truth necessarily involves the concept of accuracy. But if I'm saying that's an elephant, and I say, or somebody else says that's an elephant, and I look and I have an impression of elephant, I can say true or false. Is it accurate? Do I know if I should be experiencing that elephant, or that I shouldn't experience the elephant? How do I know? I don't have knowledge about what I have knowledge about. because that would be an infinite regression, right? Then you would have pre-knowledge or a priori knowledge, which is a concept I don't buy into, right? So if you're looking at an elephant, or that's a term that is really confusing to say, I'm looking at an elephant. But if I'm experiencing elephant, and I'm convinced that that other person's proposition deals with that elephant, I can say that's true. Is it how much accuracy do you need? And what do you mean by accuracy in that case? Should it's not like I'm seeing 80% of an elephant, right? I am experienced elephant, or I'm not experiencing elephant, right? How do I know if it's accurate? Accuracy does not make any sense when regarding truth. Either I know the elephant or I don't know the elephant. Truth is binary. It's not a matter of degree. So you can't be talking about accuracy, right? If I'm trying to shoot an arrow at a bullseye, the accuracy of my shot is determined by how far my arrow lands from the center. Why is that? If you're trying to shoot it at the bullseye, and bullseye is the center of you are referring to, then yes, but you have just set your own rules for determining accuracy. But a bullseye is a matter of degree, right? Bullseye is not an object. Bullseye is a convention. Again, it's a rule you have been setting, and then you're saying, okay, am I within that rule? But that's not what truth is. That's why you are sort of fading into something that has nothing to do with truth, and then you are maybe not even certain what objective reality is. So this is going to be interesting. What then is the bullseye of truth? Well, the truth of a statement is measurable relative to its conformity with objective reality. Okay, this is going to be important. I have to keep this one. Truth of a statement. So the truth of a statement, if I say that's an elephant, do you mean any statement or do you mean propositions? A statement could be, yellow giraffe. That's a statement, right? Is it something that can be true? I wouldn't necessarily say so, because it depends on how this statement is formulated in order to be a proposition. I would say that only propositions can be true. That is what normally people would say, that these kind of statements are propositions and they can be true or false, right? Or the answer could be, I don't know, as I pointed out yesterday or in the last part. So the truth of a statement, that statement must be a proposition then. Okay. So the truth of a proposition, what is that? So if I say that's an elephant and it's true, then the truth of the statement is elephant, right? That must be elephant. What else could it be, right? It's the elephant that is the center, or that's the object, right? The object I can refer to in that statement is elephant. So I say, that's true, that's an elephant. So we're talking about elephant. The elephant is measurable relative to its conformity with objective reality. What is that? Is that another realm? Objective reality, is that the realm of the forms that I have to compare it to? I have nothing else to compare it to. I have my experience of the elephant. I am experiencing elephant. I'm saying I have knowledge of elephant. I'm saying my proposition is true, elephant. So now I have to compare that elephant to something else. What is that or something else? Objective reality, what is that? What is there something that is intrinsically objective without anybody Can you go to a shelf over here and take down objectivity and say, I have objective elephant here, and compare it to my elephant and say, that's an objective elephant or something like that? I don't understand this. What is this? The truth of the statement. Okay, let's try once more. Just for this is extremely important, right? This is where, now we are at the deep end, right? The truth of a statement is measured relative to its conformity with objective reality. The truth of the statement. Let's say I have a statement that I might not even be experiencing elephant. I could propose elephant without experiencing elephant. That's a deliberate lie. But no one can say to me, you are not experiencing elephant, because they don't have access to my experience. It might be highly unlikely for them if you're standing on the North Pole and somebody says, that's an elephant. And you'll say, yeah, get out of here. But you can't check, right? You must admit that. But you would probably say, okay, that guy, I'm not going to share my food with him if we get to that point, right? But you can't tell him that he's not experiencing elephant, because you only have your own experience. Okay, so if I make a statement of truth, I say, that's an elephant. But I know if it's true or not. But the other guy listening to my proposition have to say that that proposition is false if he does not experience the elephant. So who's doing what here? Me lying about the elephant, or the other guy saying my proposition is false? What's going on here? Right? I really, really feel that he's on a completely different universe than I am here, right? There's something completely different in his thinking, whether or not it's me who has got something wrong, and he has something that I have completely missed. Otherwise, his way of understanding metaphysics is completely screwed, right? It's completely screwed. Unless there's something that I missed completely, his way of seeing it is completely screwed. And this, I would think, has to do with whether or not you have an idealist approach to metaphysics, or you have a materialist / dualist approach to metaphysics. And that's why it would be a really nice thing if this dude had done some metaphysics and epistemology, definitions and so on beforehand, so people would know if he is crazy or something, right? So it's there's so much stuffed into this line. It's almost impossible to decipher what he means, right? He's talking about all sorts of weird stuff, and and Newtonian physics, Einstein and Lisbon, and all sorts of weird examples. I mean, not exactly weird, and then just throws this at you like, well, the truth of a statement is measurable relative to its conformity with objective reality. This one is just like, I don't need to define anything. I don't need to clarify anything. No metaphysics, no epistemology. I just throw this sentence out and everything is solved. That's it. That took 23 pages to get here, right? Okay, so this is the sort of the center of the carousel. This is what everything revolves around, right? The understanding of your experience. Its metaphysics is so important, right? The truth of a statement, proposition, is measurable. Do you have to measure the truth of the statement? You measure, is that you say elephant is true? That you're comparing to a conformity to some objective reality? So it's almost nonsensical, right? I think it's due to a materialist / dualist metaphysics, which I consider fallacious, right? So, and I already feel that he can't see that it's nonsensical what he says, right? If you know it's true, why do you need to compare it to anything else? Is there a higher truth somewhere? What is that superior truth he's going for? If you know it's true, why do you need to go any further? So it's a sort of a secondary truth he's dealing with, and now we are going to the real truth, or what the hell is going on, right? Okay. Putting aside the challenges of language for the moment, if I point to a seagull and say, that is an anvil, I'm clearly mistaken. Why? You're just lying, aren't you? If you think it's an anvil and you're pointing at what I think is a seagull, well, I would say, if you're saying that's an anvil, I would say that's a false proposition. But if you're experiencing seagull, I can't tell you that you shouldn't be experiencing seagull. I don't even know if you're experiencing a seagull instead of an anvil. I would think that, well, he's probably, experiencing an anvil, and I'll say, you're fucking crazy. I'm going the other direction, right? But I can't tell you what you experience. Why are you clearly mistaken? You know if you're mistaken, but I don't know, right? Is that the problem of subjectivity we are dealing with now, right? That you have access to some objective reality where you can go and say, this is how things are. And if you don't believe me, shut the fuck up. So this is a sort of approach towards authoritarianism, isn't it? Because anvils are inorganic and cannot fly. They're inorganic and cannot fly. Excuse me, just got some weird pictures. No, but it's not whether or not an anvil can fly. It's whether or not you experience it, right? There's a difference between experiencing something and proposing something, right? The whole thing about this language thing is that most of it is there to manipulate people into thinking something that isn't the case, right? Therefore, you have to be sharp about proposing something and experiencing something, right? These are two different things. You have to separate them. The truth value of my statement is measured relative to the objective facts of reality. Since the seagull is not in fact an anvil, my statement is untrue. Yeah, you know whether or not it's true. Is untrue the same as false? I'm not sure. Untrue, or maybe I should know that term. Untrue, what is that? Is that the same as false? Okay, I think I've been around that enough. Naturally, this equation between truth and reality requires that language and our senses be considered relatively objective. There are many good reasons to believe that both language and sense evidence are in fact objective. We could get into a complicated discussion about this, but it should suffice to say that, okay, I need to take this in. I was a little absent there. There are many good reasons to believe that both language and sense evidence are in fact objective. There are many good reasons. Okay, give them to me, please. We could get into a complicated discussion, but it should suffice to say that since you are using your eyes to read a book written in a human language, we can at least agree that your eyes and the language we share are at least objective enough. A language is not objective. A language is not an object, right? That's a language. Oh, no, it doesn't work. Language is a convention of how to describe things that could potentially be a reference to something objective, but the language itself is not objective, right? Children can learn to experience elephants without learning a language, but it takes years and years and years and years to learn a new language, right? That's because it's a convention. It's not something that is natural, right? It's something you have to train yourself to, but understanding elephants is something your mind does by its own accord, more or less, right? The only thing that children need is a word to attach to it called elephant, right? And that word is superficial. It's artificial. It's just a sound. Words are just sound you make with your mouth. It's in fact, when we're talking language, it's always a good idea to step back a bit and remind yourself that language is just sounds. It's a sound you make with your mouth, your throat, right? That's all it is. That you attach meaning to it. That's something that is only in your head, right? If they are not, we have nothing to talk about, and you haven't understood anything I've written anyway. So this sentence will be equally meaningless and might as well have been rendered in wingdings. Assuming you can tell the difference between the above two fonts, we can reasonably continue. This feels a bit like Sam Harris's "Put Your Hand on the Stove" or something like that. I'm not saying it's the same thing, but this language thing is, yeah, but it's a convention we are both trained to use. That doesn't make it objective, right? Okay, so let me see how long the next one is. We are going on 45 minutes. Maybe I should keep this for the next. The next bit. These short chapters are actually a good size for sort of a rounded discussion. So I think I will stop here and thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed, and I would appreciate if there's something you misunderstand, or something something that is confusing about what I'm saying, that you need me to clarify. Please make a comment, please like, please share, please subscribe, whatever you need. Stay in touch. And otherwise, have a nice day. See you in the next part.